All right, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to the Bee Collective, the folks at Ecology on Tap. I am Rachel, and I'm going to talk about a wild food way. All right, it's pretty bright. Are you all seeing that okay? Great. I don't think we can talk about foraging or really anything without doing some land acknowledgement. This is settled territory that belongs to the Shawnee and the Miami and other tribes possibly throughout time. And foraging is all about the actual place. So I'm not going to tell you about New England. I'm not going to tell you about another country. I'm not even going to tell you about the unglaciated part of Ohio, because what I know is this place, and where we are is this place. And that is really deeply knowing the land and the earth is the first step to being a forager. I will tell you just a tiny bit more about me. On the left, there's my great-great-grandmother. I don't have a history of foraging in my family, but I do have a history of folks who needed to find food. And sometimes that meant fishing, a lot of gardening. That's me in the middle on my grandmother's farm. Fun fact, I weighed 11 pounds and 2 ounces when I was born. That's a lot. But everything that I've learned is through my own experience. And that is how I would encourage anyone to come to foraging. The land acknowledgement is not just about who was here first, but also everything I say tonight is based on Indigenous knowledge. And my sources come from, these are some of them. Robin Wall Kimmerer and Breeding Sweetgrass is just a beautiful book that does lead to some species identification, but really is grounded in the truths of ecology and the human relationship to the earth. Eating on the Wild Side by Joe Robinson was really informative to me. It's about the nutrition of wild foods and how we've largely bred out a lot of the nutrition by making simple choices like choosing purple carrots or red carrots to either grow in your garden or eat yourself. You can really increase the amount of nutrients that you're getting. And then Adrienne Marie Brown is like a, spiritual leader to me. Emergent Strategy talks about this concept of being in right relationship with each other, which is based on being in right relationship with the earth, using nature as a model for collective goodwill. And then we are so lucky in this place to have Alexis Nicole Nelson, Black Forager, live right in this neighborhood. Her Instagram is full, and TikTok are full of videos about much more exciting ways to use foraged foods than I'm going to tell you about, but also just totally great seasonal information. There's some Instagram handles to follow. And I just want to say that it is no mistake that these are all women that I draw a source from and that I would recommend you drawing resources from. I find foraging to be a really nurturing, kind of a spiritual act that is anti-patriarchal. And it is really important, and I think I have to say it, you gave me a microphone in this day and age. Listen to women and non-binary people. We have to listen to Black women and people. We have to listen to the Indigenous knowledge. Men, get in touch with your feminine side. That's how you'll know how to forage. And that's the only way forward for our collective good. So, deep breath, let's get into actual foraging. I organize this talk around the seasons because that's how I live, and that's how I think you need to get in tune with the earth. So we'll start where we are, which is the summer. In the summer, the flavors are bright, and there's long days of sunshine, and nature is just full of abundance. All the creatures are just eating and breeding and feeding their young, and there's just so much out there. There's a lot of quick calories. We're part of nature, right? And so we need that too right now. And when I was thinking of one wild food that could embody this spirit of summer, I thought of something, and we're going to play a little guessing game. So I'm going to give you some clues. I'm going to describe a context, and when you think you know it, just shout it out. I probably won't be able to hear you, so I'll just keep going until I'm done with clues, unless you could shout really loud. So what I'm thinking of, this wild food that you can find all around, is you would typically find it, you'd be walking in a neighborhood, German village maybe, Ohio State campus, and you would notice a flock of robins, probably a lot of bird life on a tree. And you might notice that first, not from their calls, but from the ruddy waste on the ground. And they would be flocking because they're eating these berries that are shaped like little blueberries that hang off of the branches of the smooth bark tree. Anyone? Yay! Serviceberry! Or Saskatoon, I think is a wickedly cool way to say that. Juneberry. This just happened about a month ago. That's my kid Lil. They went into an Ohio State University facility for physical therapy. And when they came out, they had a cup in their hand. And I'm like, what are you bringing your trash out for? They wanted to harvest the serviceberries that they had seen on the way in. And this is an odd space because, usually they're covered with birds, right? And I don't know if maybe there wasn't enough predation around or not enough predation. Maybe there were too many predators around because there's not a lot of cover. But this tree was just loaded. Serviceberries are delicious. You can eat them fresh. You can can them. Birds love them when they drop on the ground. Raccoons and everything else loves them. There are lots of berries in the summer. Obviously, know your berries. Get to know the things. And you can do that. Notice I didn't mention any references that were like guidebooks because I think you have to learn this from other people. I think foraging is a communal act where you are doing it with folks that you trust because what you read in a book sometimes doesn't translate to what you see. So serviceberries are great. You can probably identify, many of you, a raspberry or a wineberry or something like that. And then there's other red berries around that you should not eat. So learn what a yew-berry looks like and don't eat that. I'm going to zoom through 2 other species that I love in the summer, but I just don't have time to tell you about right now. Chanterelles, found my first 3 this week, but they are starting to come up. Thank you, rain. And plantain, I was thinking about what might be right here, and I could basically guarantee there would be plantain. So talk to me later if you want to learn more about all the things that plantain can do for you. It's an amazing food and medicine. So if nature gives us abundance, it's asking something of us. I think foraging is a reciprocal act. And what it's asking of us is, I think, some measure of permission. A lot of foraging talks will tell you about, asking permission of the landowner, making sure that you're following certain rules. And I have a little bit of a different idea, especially about public land. That serviceberry was on the Ohio State University campus, which is ostensibly a public institution. And I'm sure we're all aware, could we get permission to forage that tree? Who would you ask? How long would it take? What would you have to do? The berries would be totally gone and wasted at that point, right? Not wasted, nature never wastes, but you wouldn't be able to eat them. And I think the same is true for city lands, for city parks. Most of the things that you'll see here are either on my property, not mine, the property that I live on, and or city property. And I personally embody an ethic of the Scandinavian idea of every man's rights. It conflicts with laws for sure, but I think that we're part of nature. We are not separate from nature. We have to be out there enjoying the gifts. And that involves some little ideas about permission that might be different than the rules say on the books. So then we move into autumn. And autumn is when nature is starting to store up its energy in these dense ways. And so flavors get really rich. There's a lot of fattening, enriching foods that are out there. It calls us to savor things. And so the food that I'm thinking about with autumn is something that it's actually a whole type of food. It's the only other forageable that I found here right now within eyesight if it wasn't dark. And this food grows on trees also. And You would typically find it by maybe looking for what the squirrels are doing in the fall. It's going to have hard shells. Maybe you're going to like slip a little bit when you're walking through the woods, like you're walking on marbles. Or maybe your shoe is going to become stained. I'm thinking of, oops, not pawpaws, nuts. So nuts are so abundant in the fall. Acorns, hickory, chestnuts. Chestnuts there are Chinese hybrids out there. And these are some of the most delicious, densely nutritious foods that you can find. If you have a hickory available to you and you harvest those sweet nut meats, it takes a lot of work, but they're so delicious. Acorns, you have to do some processing to get the tannins out, but so many of us can identify those trees, right? That is food that's available to you. Chestnuts are like corn on a tree, is how I've heard them described. They're so sweet and they have so much rich carbohydrates. And one thing that's not pictured here, afterwards, I'll have a little taste available of nocino, which is actually the walnuts, or what I saw right here. I could point them out to you. Nocino is a liqueur made from that, so you'll have a chance to taste that wild food if you want afterwards. The other thing in a fall forageable I had to mention is the pawpaw. I will talk to you all about that later if you want, but I will not end my talk on time if I tell you more right now. But it's delicious and beautiful, and I love those trees. And so what does that fattening and enriching call us to do? I think it calls us to be generous. I think that another ethic that foragers must have is this generosity of spirit where, for instance, when the pawpaws fall, there's so many ripe pawpaws. And there's some inclination, I think, as humans to like hoard them all, right? Or sell them, or like, dig into the capitalistic system. And I don't think that's what is intended. I think some of those need to go to the raccoons. They need to spread the seeds. That's the point of the fruit, is to go elsewhere and go in lots of different directions. So anytime that you are foraging or thinking about wild spaces, I think it's important to think about the generosity. Where can you spread that wealth among the humans and the natural environment? So next season is winter, right? And winter is when things really slow down, but they do not stop. Nature does not stop. Nature rests. A lot of parts of the earth rest, and I think we should too. But here's where we can enjoy any sustenance that we've taken in, that we're putting up over the seasons. And I use winter as a place to really scout. Going to the woods in the winter is just great. Like, there's not a lot of people, which I love. There you can see a lot more in terms of like you can see through a forest and get to know a landscape. And it's also really important to just let your body slow down. But there are still treats to be had. And this one that I'm thinking of, which you can pretend if you already saw it, also grows on a tree, on a log, on the ground, or either upright. And you might spot it as these tiny little white dots called pins. Or if it's further along, you're going to see a big splotch. And you'll know that you missed it if you smell what its name is, which is a little bit of a stinky, seaweedy, like you're at the ocean kind of smell. And it's oyster mushroom. This is my closest forageable, as in that log is right outside of my back door. It was from a tree that we had taken down, and after a while, several years, these oyster mushrooms started sprouting up. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I know what that is, and I can eat it. One year, nature gave it to me for Christmas, like 10 pounds of oyster mushrooms. So again, with the generosity, that's the time that you go share that with friends, right? Put some up in your freezer, sure, but share with friends. Oyster mushrooms, people a lot of times when they think about foraging, the mushrooms are like it's like either I want to find morels or I don't want to die. My strategy there is, yes, learn the things that might really kill you, but focus on the species that are pretty identifiable and unmistakable. So the chanterelles that I showed earlier, there is a false chanterelle. It won't kill you. It won't taste good. But they're pretty they don't look like anything else. Oyster mushrooms, if you learn what a true gill is, you can identify an oyster mushroom. You can get into spore printing, and that allows you to get like much more refined and eat things that are more in the middle ground of either edible or going to kill you. But I just kind of add species little by little as I get really comfortable and really know them, and maybe get introduced again communally from someone else. So winter, I was going to show a couple more here. Persimmon is another great winter food. It has to, in my opinion, it has to freeze. It has to hang, like be just juicing off the tree before you actually want to eat it, before it's like sweet enough to eat. So that's a winter treat. And I think there's one more. Spice bush actually can be enjoyed in very many stages, but I typically like to eat it in the winter when after it's mature. That's there's a picture there of like a infusion that I made with spice bush. You can also dry it and use it as a substitute for cinnamon. It's kind of a wintry flavor. So if winter is for rest, what I think that calls the forager ethic to do is build awareness. And that is how I think you become a better and better forager. It's just being really aware of the woods or the urban landscape. Start to identify things that then your brain can filter out so it knows what's new, and then ask about that. And it's great to have like mentors or friends who are into this, because every time someone travels and they go to a park and they see something else identified, they bring it back to you, and vice versa. But winter, I think, is just a super great time for learning. So now we have rounded the way to spring. And spring is when I feel like nature moves like fast and furious in a little ways. It's ephemeral. There's lots of things that pop up and then disappear really quickly. And it provides, like, a lot of the things that you can forage in the spring are these like dense bits of nutrition and excitement. And I feel like it's like an awakening phase. And there's also a lot of healing herbs and foods that come up in the spring, which I think is really interesting. If you're coming out of a long winter of rest and you're getting back into community, maybe we need that. We need to have some of that in our life. So the spring thing I'm thinking of is something that you usually find first by touching it. You're walking maybe on a bike path or maybe in the woods, and something brushes your ankle, and then, ow, it hurts. And it doesn't hurt like a bee sting where your whole body is getting, all of the adrenaline rush, but it hurts like a thorn, but you look and there's nothing there. But when you're looking, you see this plant, this like deep green plant with serrated edges, and it is, Chris knows, the stinging nettle. The stinging nettle is a magnificent plant. These are all wood nettles, although there is a cultivated variety. So this is one species that you can intentionally plant and raise if you want to. But wood nettles are delicious, first of all. You can eat them. You just have to get rid of those spiky spines, either by heating them or macerating them in some way. You can do it in your mouth, or you can put them in a blender and make pesto. They're super high in potassium and magnesium, which makes me wonder if that's something we need to replace after winter. And they're also medicinal in a couple of ways. One way that I use nettle is to kind of inspire a reaction in areas like my joints that are often achy. So it's similar to some people use bee stings, right, to deal with like arthritis. And the sting of the nettle, I'll actually do to myself, brush my arm against it and allow that response to happen. And it does feel like it brings some healing to me. You can also wear gloves when you harvest it and not have that problem. A couple other spring things. Flowers. There's a lot of flowers you can eat, and they're wildly different and delicious. Here's the redbud, elderflower, violets. Violets have a cool reaction, which Black Forager has an awesome video of the syrup turning from like a pinky purple to a blue with the addition of acidic lemon juice. So they're fun, but they also are really tasty. Redbud flowers are delicious, like little lemon bombs in your mouth. And then I don't think you can have a foraging talk in this area without mentioning ramps. And ramps do exist in urban environments. They exist bigger and better in less disturbed environments. And this is where I think scouting is really important and developing this like sense of intuition. So the ramp spots that I've found have all been co-current with pawpaws. Pawpaws are much more easily identifiable most of the year, but they're co-current with pawpaws. They exist in these like lowlandy, watery areas, kind of flatlands, and I just get like a sense about them that they might be there, and then I start looking. And this is another example of something a lot of people don't think about looking for the flowers, but those are the flowers on the right. They form these little seed heads as well, and so you can see them other times of year. And I think ramps is an area that we have to talk about like our collective stewardship. So if spring is about like awakening, what it calls the forager to do is to think about stewardship. We have to use the environment that ramps come in a way that allows them to continue to grow. And again, that means if we go in and we dig them all up, they will not be there for anyone else or for the earth or for any of the habitat that they provide. So I'm a forager who only takes the leaves. I only take the leaves of about 10% of the plants, if that. And I really enjoy them and savor them and appreciate them. I would not sell them. I think that is like inserting a capitalistic system in a system that isn't meant for that. But they are wildly delicious. So look for your spots and steward them carefully. And I would say that about every other species here that I've talked about. Oop. So there we are at the end of this talk for me. I have a lot more to say about this. So if you would like to talk about it more, I would love that. But I really encourage you to think like a part of nature, to be a forager, and embody these ethics however you can, of permission and what that means to you, of generosity to yourself and to each other and the earth, of awareness, what's out there, what's missing, what could be brought in, and then stewardship so that we can continue to forage on and on and on. So thank you very much. There's how you can contact me. Thanks to everybody here.